You know that feeling when you look back at a decade, maybe the 80s or 90s, and then you look at today, and everything just feels fundamentally different.
Oh,
The
definitely.
technology, the cities you knew, even like the way people connect.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, um, how do we navigate those massive shifts? How do we find meaning? How do we hold on to connection when the ground beneath our feet is constantly transforming?
It's a huge question, isn't it? And it's really central to Lisa Ko's latest novel, Memory Piece.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've pulled together reviews, interviews with the author, our own notes, to really unpack this ambitious book.
Right. Our mission, basically, is to explore how Memory Piece uses the lives of these three women across, like, half a century.
Happy years.
Yeah, half a century, to delve into friendship, memory, time, art, tech, activism, and, well, what the future might hold. Maybe terrifyingly, maybe hopefully.
So what can we learn from their journey through all these turbulent years?
Let's find out.
Okay, let's unpack this. So at the heart of the story are three Asian American women, Giselle Chen, Jackie Yong, and Ellen Ng.
Right. And they meet as teenagers back in the early 1980s in the New York City tri-state area.
And what pulls them together?
Well, it seems to be this kind of shared alienation, a feeling of not quite belonging. And that sparks this desire for something different.
They have this initial vision maybe of a future filled with creative freedom and possibility.
Exactly. But the novel structure is really interesting, too. It kind of mirrors that complex connection they have.
How
It's described as an interconnected anthology. So it's split into three main parts, and each part really focuses intensely on just one of the women's perspectives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Ko uses deliberately varying styles for each section. So you get things like streams of consciousness, where you're sort of dropped right into a character's unfiltered thoughts.
Right into their head.
Yeah, exactly. And also unreliable narrator. So you're getting their perspective, but you know it might be skewed by their own history or, feelings.
That gives each character such a distinct voice then, and shows their maybe unique relationship with time and memory. Sometimes fractured, even.
Precisely. It really individualizes them.
So who are these friends? Let's maybe start with Giselle Chen.
Okay, Giselle. She's the performance artist. And she seems driven by this real need to capture and understand life through her art, constantly documenting things.
The sources mention she's been journaling since she was 5.
Since age 5, yeah. It's incredible.
Wow. And her art gets pretty intense, doesn't it? Like the mall piece,
Yeah.
where she secretly lived in a mall.
Or Blood Piece, where she documented her menstrual cycles. Her journey seems to be about navigating that whole art world thing.
Wanting recognition, maybe.
Yeah, wanting fame recognition, but also grappling with the tension between her artistic vision and, well, the demands for funding or what the market wants. That classic struggle.
Makes sense. Okay, then there's Jackie Yong.
Jackie's the coder, the web designer. And initially, she was really thrilled by the internet's early promise. That sort of egalitarian, connected feeling it had at the start.
Like the utopian phase.
Kind of, yeah. Her focus is technology and memory. She even creates this early social media software called Lin, specifically designed to collect other people's memories.
Interesting, like an archive.
Exactly. But her story tracks how that technology evolves, how it shifts towards monetization and surveillance. And she has to confront that change.
That's a journey many people who were online early can probably relate to.
Definitely. And finally, there's Ellen Ng. She's the community activist and organizer.
Okay.
She's really passionate about building communal spaces. Like, there's this project refurbishing an abandoned building into the Sola Squat, which is a co-op.
So her work puts her right in the middle of community struggles, confronting things like gentrification.
Gentrification, increasing policing, yeah. She's on the front lines of that.
What's fascinating, based on the reviews, is how their friendship itself works. It's not presented as this, like, perfect, easy bond.
No, not at all. The sources really note it has its definite ups and downs. Sometimes antagonism even emerges between them.
But they stick around in each other's lives.
Yeah, despite everything, they stay in each other's orbits. They profoundly impact each other. They push each other to grow. One review captured it really well, saying the relationship behaves as an entity of its own.
Like it's a fourth character almost.
Kind of. It's more than just the sum of its parts. It's this dynamic, living thing between them.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these three interconnected lives become the lens for exploring some huge themes, right?
Absolutely. Memory is definitely at the core.
Individual memory, collective memory. The whole act of trying to record it. You mentioned Giselle seeing the world like journal-like excerpts.
Right, and Jackie is literally building a digital archive of memories with her software Lean.
And Ellen?
Ellen, the activist, she's seen as a kind of living archive of community history, but she's also aware of how getting stuck in nostalgia can actually hinder future progress. It's a tricky balance.
That's really nuanced. The author even mentioned in an interview her own anxiety about time and loss, like the fear of family history just disappearing.
Yeah, and that fueled her lifelong habit of keeping records. That personal urgency feels like it's woven right into the book's fabric.
That makes a lot of sense. Then there's that tension between art and capitalism, which Giselle faces head-on.
Totally. She wants fame, sure, but feels stifled by needing funding, catering to external demands.
It sounds like the author really grapples with what it means to make art today, especially when identity itself can become a commodity.
Exactly. And the struggle isn't just about creative vision, it's practical. It's about finding the time and the physical space to actually create.
You see that literally with Ellen's rent-free squat, or Giselle living in a mall just to save money.
Yeah. One essay cited in the sources even suggested that for writers, time is this incredibly valuable commodity, like a mink or Lexus or mansion. It's the ultimate luxury you trade everything else for.
Wow. That really puts it starkly. It raises that big question about how society values creative work versus just economic output.
Definitely. And tied closely to that is technology, which the book portrays with a definite double edge.
Right. Jackie's early optimism about the internet, that's such a stark contrast to how it evolves later into, surveillance and corporate profit.
It highlights the immense power, but also the peril of technology, especially the fragility of having our personal memories digitized and stored on platforms we don't actually own.
What happens if they just vanish? Poof.
Right. The author expresses a clear tech pessimism, particularly around corporate control, but she also notes, you can't separate the tech from the people who build and use it.
It's complex.
It is, and it's almost absurd now, isn't it? People paying huge amounts for their kids to go to schools without screens. We're paying to avoid the very technology that was supposed to make life easier and more connected.
That's a wild thought. Community and identity are also vital threads here, right?
Yeah.
Especially through Ellen's activism in creating physical spaces like Sola.
Yeah, very much so. And the Asian American experience is definitely part of the novel's texture. But as one review notes, it's just a piece of the puzzle. It's not the entire focus.
So it's not solely about that identity.
No. The author talks about this idea of the leaky container of Asian American identity, sort of questioning its limitations as a sole political home. She seems to find strength in connecting struggles across different groups and acknowledging differences even within communities.
And all this plays out against the backdrop of New York City itself, which feels like this constantly changing character.
Absolutely. It's always transforming. The book shows gentrification, consumerism, social media, not appearing out of nowhere, but as the culmination of trends building over decades.
Now, one review pointed out something interesting, that this strong focus on the external world, the changing city, the tech, sometimes means less time spent directly exploring the characters' internal lives.
That's a fair observation someone made, yeah.
But maybe the idea is that the author is emphasizing how profoundly those external forces shape our inner worlds, focusing on the environment as a way to show the impact on the characters, maybe, rather than dwelling inside their heads constantly.
That's a good point. I think the material we have supports that idea, that she was really interested in mapping those larger societal shifts and their effects, almost using the characters as like seismic sensors for those changes.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The novel takes this bold leap forward into the future, specifically the 2040s.
Right, and it depicts what feels like a massive authoritarian dystopia centered in New York City.
And the elements described sound, well, almost terrifyingly recognizable.
They really do. Ubiquitous devices, gig economy jobs, pushing even elderly characters like Ellen to deliver groceries in her 70s. A total lack of data privacy, limited movement for displaced populations, and increased police presence, militarization. It's grim.
The author actually said this future felt like a very logical progression, almost inevitable, given the trends she saw in the 80s and 90s sections of the book.
Yeah, and because it's only about 17 years from the book's publication date, it feels uncomfortably close to our current reality of, say, surveillance and scarcity.
Now, there was one critique we saw in the reviews. It noted that while the future state is compelling, the novel doesn't fully explain how the country got to that specific dystopian point.
Right. That reviewer felt the lack of those detailed steps slightly muddled the exploration of the themes in that final section.
That's a fair point someone raised. It sounds like the author was maybe more focused on depicting the outcome of those trends rather than giving us a historical roadmap of the collapse.
Exactly. It suggests she's perhaps less interested in the mechanics of political change and more in the lived experience within that changed reality, how people cope.
But, okay, despite that bleak vision of the future, the sources we looked at still describe the book as hopeful, which seems maybe counterintuitive.
It does, but yes. And that hope seems to fundamentally come from the characters themselves, specifically their rediscovery of the deep value of community and connection. The idea that, as one source put it, even in times which may feel bleak and scary, we have each other.
People keep creating, they keep surviving, they find ways to connect even in the most difficult circumstances. That's the core.
That seems to be the message, yeah. And the novel's ending is quite unique, too. It doesn't wrap up with a traditional narrative scene focused directly on the characters.
What does it do?
Instead, it uses multimedia elements, photos, and archive inventory list.
That's fascinating. So the book itself becomes a kind of archive.
That was the author's intention, yes. Mapping meaning not just through words, but through different media. She feels it fades out on a kind of hopeful note, with the pictures telling a story beyond the text.
And there's that final image mentioned Giselle and Jackie together in the desert, reaching out to include Ellen.
Right, it's this powerful return to their core chosen community after decades navigating the changing world, often separately. It really reinforces that idea of interdependence as the ultimate source of hope.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've followed Giselle, Jackie, and Ellen across 50 years, watching them grapple with these huge shifts in their world. The rise of the internet, the transformation of the city, the pressures on art and identity.
Their story really highlights the enduring power of friendship and community. Also, that complicated relationship we have with memory and the technology we use to record it.
And that constant tension between creative vision and, well, economic realities. And the quiet search for moments of hope, even when facing down difficult futures.
Memory piece really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? What constitutes a meaningful life when the world around you is constantly changing, accelerating, sometimes feeling like it's spiraling out of control?
And how do memory and connection help sustain you through all of that?
It also challenges you, I think, to consider your own relationship with documenting your life in this digital age. What would your memory piece look like if it were an archive?
What are the powers and maybe the perils of living so much of our lives on platforms we don't control? Something to really chew on.